Welcome to today's tutorial on Microsoft Excel. Today we're going to be concentrating on the lookup functions within Excel. And as always, this tutorial is presented by Eddie Lowe from Eddie Lowe LLC. Please visit us on the web at www.eddie-lowe.com. So on today's agenda, we're going to be looking at the various lookup functions within Microsoft Excel. We're going to start off with the vertical lookup, known as the VLookup. Its little sibling, H-Lookup, which is a horizontal style lookup, and the newest member of the lookup family, the X-Lookup. So the syntax for VLookup, this is what we're going to put in the format we're going to put in the formula bar or the cell that we're going to be doing a lookup for, is equal to a VLookup, open parentheses, the lookup value, which can either be a static value or it can be a reference cell, the array, which is a table or a range, the column that corresponds to the value that we want returned against that lookup value, and the match type. And then we're going to close those parentheses. So let's move on over to Excel. Okay, so now we have our workbook open for this tutorial. And what we have here on the screen is a parts list of parts that we may have collected within our company, and these are all the part numbers, the manufacturer, the family, description, vendor, a unit cost, and the units sold that we've just collected over time. And this could be a pretty extensive list as you go through. This could be an inventory. This could be a list of sales representatives and their emails and their telephone numbers. It could just be any table of information that we want to take. But for today's scenario, what we're going to look at is we're going to look at building a shed. Our engineer has already come and did the design, or one of our design engineers, and they've come and given us these part numbers and said, hey, I need for you to go order these parts for me, please. And I need it in these quantities. Well, we could easily come over and say, okay, we have these part numbers, the MBH08RN0000. We can come over to the parts list, look it up, or we can reference it. As right here we have, it's the 34th item in our list, which is on line 35. And we can see that it's a concrete block. Our vendor is Home Depot, and that it sells for $1.67 each. But instead of having to go through that entire list, we can use the VLookup formula to be able to capture that information, do a fill down, and be able to get that information relatively quickly, especially if this was an extensive list that we need to cross-reference on our parts list. So let's again look over here and look at our syntax. So again, VLookup is our lookup value, the lookup array, the column number, and the match type. So in our lookup array, it's going to be that reference or that static value. So what we want to look up is we want to look up this part number here in the A column. Then we will have our lookup array, which happens to be our parts list over here. Our column number is going to be in reference to what to the item that has the information in it. So let's look carefully here at our lookup array and our column number. And we want to find this part number. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that I see folks making whenever they're doing an Excel spreadsheet and they're using the VLookup function is they are trying to use the VLookup, and they're looking up a number that happens to be maybe in the D column, but the information they're wanting to retrieve is to the left of it, and it doesn't work that way. Our value that we are looking up must be in the left-hand side of whatever information that we want. It could be over here in the middle of the cells, but we could, or table, but we can only look at our information that is to the right of the number to be able to pull up that information. So here we have that part number or any of these part numbers, and we want to find, in this case, on our first column, we want to find the quantity type or the unit that it's sold in. So if this is our entire array, this cell, part number is going to be our number one column, so we will want to find the value in number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So this is how it would look in our formula. So we want our equal sign, our VLookup, and as you can see, we have a handy dandy little cheat sheet here down in our formula for our lookup value, our table array, our column index number, and our range lookup type. So we're going to look up right here in A, so I can click on it or I could type that cell in. We're going to put a comma in our table array, so we'll come back over to our parts list. Now, if you don't have a set table that this is in a table that has been defined, you need to highlight all of the information that you have, or one of my favorite cheats here is I will actually come in and highlight all of the columns, which will allow me to grab information as this list begins to grow. So that's a little pro tip for you right there. The next piece in our that we want, again, is our column index number. Remember, we were looking for the unit. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we want the sixth row or column away from our part number that we're looking up. And then we then come in and say, do we want a true or do we want a false type match? A true type match is an approximate match. So if a part number is pretty close and it's off by a digit, it will give you that number, or it will give you the value for that, that lookup piece. Or it has to be an exact match. 99.9% of the time, you're going to use that false or that exact match. So you can either type in false right here, use that, and you see that it gives us the each type command, or we can use the 0. So anytime in Microsoft Excel you have a true or a false value, you can use 0 for false and 1 for true. It's binary. So we have that information. Again, we have that each. Now, since I used that pure column right here, the A through G, I can come now and I can do a fill down of my information as I come. So now you see I don't have to go into each one of these part numbers. Let's look at another instance of this. So now let's look at, we need to find the manufacturer. Who is making this part number for us? So again, we can come in equals VLookup, open up our parentheses. Again, we're referencing the part number. We want to come back to our table. We put a comma, and this time we're wanting to find the manufacturer. So take a moment, think to yourself, well, what column number am I going to try to or do I need to pull the information from once it's found in that left-hand column? So we want the manufacturer, so it's going to be 1, 2. So we're going to use 2, and again we're going to use our shortcut key of 0, close that parenthesis, and we find that it's a none manufacturer. Let's go ahead and fill our formula down. Now once again, we've got it in there. We can come in here now and let's finish populating the rest of our table. So again, we're going to do a VLookup. We're going to look for our part number. We're going to come over to our parts list. We're going to come over here and do this. And now we wanted to find our vendor, which is the 5th column away. and 0. So now we have our vendor. Now let me show you if we were to convert this to a table. Now if you don't have much experience with a table, you can always come in here, highlight all of this information. Then you can click this button right here, format as a table. Or what I like to do is if you have a complete table filled in, the shortcut for that is Control T, and it will turn this into a table. It's already highlighted all of this for me. So now I've got these part numbers, and I can now label this as parts table. So now that that's a ranged table right there for us, or a named table, come back to our takeoff, and we're wanting to get the unit cost. Remember that. So now it's equal to VLookup. Open up. Again, we want the cell that's over in A. Now remember our table or array, so we can now call this the parts table. And see, we didn't have to go over and highlight this time. And this time it's a cost, so G, which is the sixth value that is, the sixth value that is away from us, comma, 6, comma, 0. And we've got a problem within our cell, so let's see what we've got here. Oh, we doubled up on our information, so that's not going to be on that. It's going to be the 6th row. Get rid of a comma, hit enter, and boom, there it is. So what did we do wrong on this? We put in the wrong column number. So if you come over here and remember, 5, 6, 7 is what we're wanting, not 6. Now that could be a common mistake that you run into. So we have a 7. Now we've got the unit cost. We come down, Control D, and we can create a formula now to be able to our quantity times our unit cost. And now we've created a type of chart that we could easily come in, take these parts and send it to Home Depot and these parts to Lowe's and say, hey, I need these parts, and on your website it said it costs this much. So that's one way to do it. Now, what are some of the common problems that you can run into? A lot of folks run into problems with the VLookup, and one of them might be, let's take for instance right here, and let's look at this part number right here, the A21Z. Now, if you notice, I come in here and I just put in a space after that value. So remember that A21Z. When we come over here and we say A21Z, and you see we come up now and we get a not available. Why is that? Well, the reason for that is that our values have to exactly match. So inside of your table, you might have an instance where someone has come in and added a space after that. I've seen some folks do that. So to be able to get rid of all of this information, here's a bonus tip for you. You can use this formula, or function, command, whatever you want to call it, that says equals the trim of, let's see, A2, and we come down through here and we copy and we paste for the length of the columns, Control D, and then we hit Control C for copy, and we come over here and we just want to now paste the values, and that's this button right here. We come back over to our takeoff, and you see now we actually have a value for it. So that, again, that function that I just showed you is equal to trim, which tells it to remove all of the values that are off of that. I just got an error because I didn't put anything in the side of the parentheses, but it removes any extra spaces. Good tip for you to use. I will actually use that sometimes in my formula because, again, let's look at it. Let's say that right there I put in a value and I've got that extra space. So if I come over and I do this, trim our value that we are seeking, now we actually get values. And the reason that we did is because we use that trim. Uh, so that is, one of the reasons that sometimes your values just don't work. So if you're getting an NA inside of your formula, or inside of your cell, then what you'll want to do is check for those items to, one, make sure that your part number is exactly equals on the reference number that you have and also on your chart. Another thing you want to look for is make sure that your value that you are looking up is the leftmost portion of the column that you are in, and you're looking to values to the right of it, and that your column numbers are the same. So make sure that you're looking for that information. And also, you may get that if there is just no value inside of your table that you originally had. So this is the VLookup. It is very useful for looking for information inside of a table or an array that has a lot of information that's put into rows, and that's what we're going to look for. All right, so that's VLookup. Okay, so now that we've looked at VLookup, let's look at HLookup, which is a horizontal lookup. So our syntax, or the information that we're going to put into the cell or the formula bar, is equal HLookup, open the parentheses, the lookup value, which can be a cell reference or it can be a static value, the array, which is a range or table that we want to look in, the row number, and the match type. So let's go back over to Excel. So here we are back over in Excel, and I've added a new worksheet into our workbook, and this is vendors, and underneath the vendors I have a chart here that has the information put in a horizontal fashion. So the values that we're looking for are across the top row, and the headers is actually down over here in column 1. Now it doesn't matter if this information is in row 1 or if it's in row 2 or if it's in row 16, and I'll show you that here. So let's go back over to our takeoff sheet. And what we're looking for now is information. We want to find the address, the city, the state, and the phone of the vendor that we had previously found using a VLookup. So here we are going to use an HLookup value. So using our syntax of equals HLookup, our lookup value, again E2, could be static, can be a cell reference. Our table array, so we go over to our vendors and we can just do the range of our actual table, and we're going to look for the second row for which is the address. This is row 1. It's not equal to over here on our left hand side, it's actually equal to the number of rows away from the information that we seek. So number 2, and then we're going to want the exact match function, so you can see that we have our address here. So let's look at another way of putting this in. So HLookup, again, E2, and this time we put in, previously I had labeled that table as vendors. As you can see right here, it says we have a table of vendors, and we're going to want the third row now and 0. And you're going to find that in Microsoft Excel on the HLookup, it does not like tables. So how are we going to put this information in to where we can build our list and not always changing our information? So instead, let's retype in our formula, HLookup, our cell that we're looking for, and we're going to go back over to our table, and this time we are going to highlight all of the rows, the row numbers. If you remember in VLookup, we highlighted all of the column numbers. So again, we're looking for the city. So 1, 2, 3 rows down, and we're wanting the exact match. So what we have here is an error saying that we don't have any information. Well, I actually had typed that wrong. I hit the wrong button. So again, we want E2, and now we come back and we have our vendors. Now, we can do the same type of information, and we can come over to our state is equal to our HLookup, our vendors, our rows. This time we want the state, which is the fourth, 1, 2, 3, 4. And as you can see, I had missed my vendor or reference again. So E2, 4, and 0, North Carolina. And let's do the last one here before we do a fill. So again, equals HLookup, the value that we're wanting to reference, the array, and the telephone number this time is what we're seeking. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows down. And again, the exact match function. So there's our telephone number. Now, normally you can do a fill down, but I want to show you this. As you can see, we have an error right here. Why? Because when we went in and put our rows in, you see that we have gone from 2 to 3. Common error that folks make. So what you'll want to do is when you want to do this, you're going to want to make it an absolute values. And we'll make them absolute, locking them in with the $sign. So now you see that if we put it down, we now have the information. So again, let's go in and lock these values. And our last one, and now we can just fill down, and our HLookup and our information that we're looking for has been found. So let's recap the errors that you may receive that keeps your formula from working. 1, again, your number or your information that you're looking for, your reference cell or your lookup value does not equal the exact same information that you are seeking against. Make sure there are no spaces, so you'll want to check against that. The next thing you'll want to check for is make sure that you don't have any spaces. Also, you'll want to check and make sure that you're not using a table for the HLookups. The next problem that you may have is that you may have not put in absolutes and filled down. So check against those to make sure that your information is working. All right, so that's the HLookup, the horizontal lookup. So let's look at the last member of the lookup family, the XLookup. The XLookup is a little bit more friendlier once you start using the lookup functions. It is not available with older versions of Microsoft Excel. If you have an Office 365 account or the latest version of Excel before 365, it may be in there, but it is in Office 365. And the way that the XLookup is written out is equal to XLookup, open up your parentheses, and you're going to have the lookup value, the same type of information that we had in the VLookup or the HLookup. It can be a static value or it can be a referenced cell. This time you're going to have a lookup array. So instead of looking up inside of a table or inside of a large range of table, you're going to have an array of information that you're going to look up the value in, and then you're going to have a return array. So instead of a column or a row number that you're going to put in there, you're now going to put the range of where the information is that you want returned. And then you also have the options now of, if the information is not found, you can actually tell the XLookup function you want a specific value to be put in there, or you want a formula of something to be calculated instead of having that NA that's there. And then you also have the match type, which again is going to be 0 and 1, and there's also a -1, which goes from the smallest to the largest. But let's look at this in Excel now. Okay, so here we are back in our workbook, and we've got the same information that we had previously put in. So in this instance, let's just go ahead and get rid of this information and do it with an XLookup. So similar to what we did earlier, and we're wanting to find the quantity type. So now we can come in and say, okay, equal to the XLookup. Again, the value that we want to look up. And this time we're going to do the lookup array. So let's go back over to our parts list and say that our lookup array is going to be in the parts number column. So let's look at the information that is next, which is we need our return array. So we want to look up information over here in the unit. So now you can see, instead of having to highlight the entire chart and then counting the numbers of columns that we have, because you may have a spreadsheet that's got 200 columns on it, and you would have to sit there and count and figure out which cell that you're, or which row you're looking for. Now it's just as simple as just highlighting that row. And if the information is not found, we want it to tell us that the information does not exist. So we'll put in DNE, and then our match mode. So as you can see, a wildcard match, you can put in exact matches and whatnot. So let's go with our old favorite here of 0 and return, and we find that we have the same information that we had. But instead of having to go through and count and whatnot, we were easily able to find that information. So let's fill this down and see what it gives us. And it gives us the same exact information that we previously had in there. So now let's look at the manufacturer. So again, equals our XLookup, and we want to find our part number again, and this time we're wanting to come over to our part numbers, and this time we have this array because we want the information in A, and in our return we want it to return B, and we want it to return none if it doesn't exist. And then we come back, hit our 0 again, and there we have our information. Now, what happens if it didn't find that? Now remember, we can always have the same exact problems that we always have of our values not matching. So let's just add an extra space in there. So now you see that it comes back and says that it does not exist, instead of having that NA in there like we did with the XLookup and or not the XLookup, but the VLookup and the HLookup. So let's put our information back, and we've just filled that in, and let's just do our vendor so that way we've got the information. So one more time, equals our XLookup, and we've got our handy dandy cheat right here. So our lookup, we come over and we have our parts number, We want to look up our vendor over here in E. We now come back and we say, okay, that's our return array is, oh, that's where we made a mistake. So is equal to X lookup of this, take off value, the parts number, we want a comma, we want here, we want, again, does not exist, and 0, and we have our information. So let's look at it in terms of an versus an HLookup. So again, for our address, we want to come in equals a XLookup value. We want to find our vendor. We come over to our vendor page and we say look up in here in row 2, and we want you to return the values in row 3, and we want it to say again, does not exist or anything that you want. If you don't want it to do anything and go back to returning just the NA, you can skip this by just adding another comma, and then you come in and you add your 0 value for an exact match, and we can return it. Now, if you're doing it as an H, remember that you need to make sure that you're locking your values right here. So come in and make this an absolute value of putting that in. And you can also, if you want, come in and hit the F4 key with that highlighted, and it does it for you. So we hit the return. Oh, well, I guess we didn't lock our values up here on the vendors. So we come back up here, we add that, and now we should be able to easily fill that in. So the XLookup makes it a lot easier, and you don't have to remember which way you count. Another benefit of the XLookup is that you can look for items above or to the left of the information that you're looking for. It really doesn't care. So the HLookup has a lot of benefits to it. So whenever you can, use that XLookup. It's there now. Again, if you have a newer version, Microsoft 365 and whatnot. So this is pretty much it for our different types of lookup. We've looked at the VLookup, the HLookup, and the new XLookup. Thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, please comment below and I'll answer those as soon as I can. Also, if you'd like to see any specific topics on Microsoft Excel or another Microsoft Office product, please comment below. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe. And feel free to visit us at www.eddie-low.com. Again, thank you.